Hello, everyone. I haven't made a video in a while, but I wanted to. Some things have been on my mind, and I've just been pondering and thinking about them. You know, uh, right now, President Biden just recently gave a speech. I think it was last Friday, where he is going to push forth on mandating people get to get vaccinated. And there are people that maybe you are in school, maybe you're going to college someplace, and now your university is mandating you to get vaccinated. And if you're a Catholic, if you're a believer, you're probably wondering, can I take a religious exemption? And as people try to take a religious exemption or think about sending in a religious exemption, they're being faced with questions. They're being faced with questions like, "Have you always been this way?" Have you ever had another vaccine? Have you ever taken an Advil? It's like we're being tested and questioned of whether we are really living by faith. Okay, whether this is really a religious exemption. What does your pastor say? What does your bishop say? And we're put on the defense for wanting to take a religious exemption from this vaccine. And what came to me was this idea that, faith is unreasonable to the world. Think about it. Do people, if you say you're a believer, do they look at you as a reasonable person? Do they look at you as someone who is scholarly and someone who is, uh, or do they look at you as someone who is silly? Oh, that's silly. I think most of us have experienced the latter. That if you say you're a believer, if you say you're a Christian, if you say you're living by faith, you're looked upon as if you're silly. And that's because I think the world sees faith as unreasonable. And we're being forced to be reasonable. You got to give me a reasonable reason why you don't want to take this vaccine. Well, I don't want to take this vaccine because I'm relying upon God to protect me and to heal me. The scriptures are filled with stories of Jesus healing the sick, and I'm choosing to trust in him. That's faith. That's living your life by faith, right? That's grounds for a religious exemption. It might not be reasonable to you, but it's very reasonable to me. I live my life this way. And if you think that this is something new, it isn't. There's nothing new about this. Listen to this story of a woman, a hemorrhage, a woman who was bleeding for 12 years in the day of Jesus. Listen to the story. A great crowd had followed Jesus and thronged about him. And there was this woman who had a flow of blood for 12 years, a flow of blood for 12 years, and who had suffered much under many doctors and had spent all that she had. She had spent all her money going to doctors and was no better, but rather grew worse. She was no better, but she rather grew worse. And she had heard the reports about Jesus. She had faith. She had heard the reports about Jesus, and she came up behind him in the crowd and touched the hem of his garment. Because she said to herself, she said in her mind, if I touch even his garments, I shall be made well. And immediately the hemorrhage ceased. And she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And Jesus, perceiving in himself that a power had gone forth from him, he immediately turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched me?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing around you, well, yet you say, 'Who touched you?'" And he looked around to see who had done it. And the woman, knowing what had been done to her, came in fear and in trembling and fell down before him. And she told him the whole truth. And Jesus said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Daughter, your faith has made you well. Because you believed in me." What is religion? Religion is our belief in Jesus in the most simplest description. Believing in Jesus, believing he is Lord, believing that he has authority over sickness and over death, believing that he can heal you. That's your religion. That is your faith. And if a university says to you, you can't have a religious exemption, excuse me? Who determined that? I am I am choosing not to get a vaccine because I'm believing in the Lord. I'm trusting in the Lord. And I'm choosing not to trust you. I'm choosing not to trust Pfizer. I'm choosing not to trust Dr. Fauci. I'm choosing not to trust, I'm choosing to trust Jesus. That's my religion. That is my faith. And it doesn't have to be reasonable to you. Do you think that this woman was looked upon as reasonable? Think about it. Do you think that she was looked upon as reasonable? Stretching out and touching the hem of Jesus's garment? No, that's not reasonable. That's crazy. But that is her faith that led her to do that. And it was her faith that healed her. And that is her religion. And she has a right to that. She has a right to practice her faith. And so do you. Did she always believe this way? No. She went to 12 doctors. So just because someone hasn't maybe taken this approach in the past does not mean it's not their religion. It's there in our Bible. Jesus had compassion on those who came to him. He healed the sick. He cast out demons. That's my religion. I believe and trust in him. Bartimaeus, blind man sitting on the side of the road. Tell me if you think this guy was reasonable. They came to Jericho, and as he was leaving Jericho with his disciples, a great multitude followed. Bartimaeus, a blind beggar, Bartimaeus, a blind beggar, was sitting by the roadside. And when he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. And many rebuked him. Why do you think they rebuked him? Was he being unreasonable? Was he acting out of his faith? They told him to be silent, but he cried out all the more, Son of David, have pity on me. Have mercy on me. And Jesus stopped and said to him, call him. And they called the blind man. And throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and came to Jesus. And Jesus said to him, what do you want me to do for you? Jesus said to him, what do you want me to do for you? And he said, Master, I want to see. Master, I want to see. He said, go your way. Your faith has healed you. Believing in Jesus to heal you is faith. Having Jesus heal you. Jesus says many times, every time a healing happens in Jesus's presence, Jesus always says, it was your faith that healed you. It was your religious exemption that healed you. Okay, so take heart, stand strong, believe in the Lord. Your faith, hey, it may appear unreasonable to the world, but that's our religion, and you have a right to it. Nobody can stick something in your arm or stick something up your nose without you saying you want it. Now, mind you, can someone in faith be inspired to get the vaccine? Maybe it's an act of love. If you see not getting the vaccine, maybe it's an act of faith. Maybe you might see someone choosing out of faith to get the vaccine as an act of love. Well, sure. Yeah, you could do that. And it could be it could be a religious experience for you to get the vaccine. It could also be a religious experience for you to not get it. It can be an act of faith, like that woman who bled for 12 years. Okay? God bless you. Just some thoughts. Be encouraged.